I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right. So for today's Heartbeat conversation, I've got Marco van Huigenbos coming to us from Fort Macleod, Alberta. And I just thought I'd take some time and get him to introduce himself, go through a little bit about what he's been up to regarding the Coutts convoy and his current court case. And yeah, we'll just see where the conversation ends. So Marco, I know a lot of people already know who you are. We read the papers and that sort of thing. But if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes and talking about, where you are right now and a little bit about your history, be greatly appreciated for the folks that don't know you.
Absolutely. Well, I will start off by thanking you for having me on. And I always look forward to having conversations like this. And I mean, people may have heard about me or read a few headlines about me. And, they might not have been very accurate or largely biased to some degree, right? So I always appreciate the opportunity to share my version of events and things like that. So yeah, I'll get right into it. Small town farm kid, Fort Macleod, immigrated from the Netherlands in 1996, and like I said, grew up like a lot of my generation, just rural Alberta. Typical farm life, and got involved in the trades early on, went to SAIT, and started a family at, I wouldn't say necessarily, a young age, but I mean, I was 24. It wasn't like 19 or anything, but started a family at a young age.
I was 19, man.
Well, I mean, back then that might've been a lot more common than now, right? Like now,
well, how old do you think I am? I'm not that old, but no, sorry.
No, you're not. No, I wasn't trying to guess your age, but I have brothers that got married at 19. So I mean, it's even now, it's still something that definitely happens. But it all depends on maturity. But yeah, so I got married, started a family, and right around that time, I started a business, construction, which I sold a year and a half ago. After the Coutts blockade, I mean, my head wasn't in it anymore, and my focus was elsewhere, and there was things happening in my life. But we'll get to that point here shortly. Got involved in municipal politics early on. I was a councillor up until 3-4 months ago for almost 7 years. So next year, October, would be the full 2 terms. But I ran first term when I was 26 years old, and I decided to put my name forward in the fall of 2021 when we were we had just come out of our best summer ever. Isn't that what they called that? Best summer ever 2021? I think there's even a few hats floating around that said that. And I mean, municipal politics and politics in general really intrigued me. There's days where I wish I never got involved, but I mean, they're far and few in between. But got involved provincially, like a lot of Albertans did after 4 years of NDP governance here in Alberta, and which that was 2019, and a lot of people had gotten involved in the UCP as a fledgling party, and the leadership race that then occurred at that time between Brian Jean, Jason Kenney, and his other associate. But that led into, the first UCP government under Jason Kenney. And very quickly, we're obviously into the COVID years. Life fairly normal here in rural Alberta, right? Restrictions were the same across the province. I definitely believe that was a phenomenal mistake uh, of the Kenney administration, but it was still different for rural Alberta compared to urban Alberta, right? Government didn't really affect us. I mean, it was a little harder for them to implement and execute restrictions, and which is why we were largely unaffected to some degree, other than some of your public places, right? Skating rinks, things like that. There's a few arrows in grocery stores, things like that. But that leads us into the fall of 2021, right? When Jason Kenney backtracked on his promise that he delivered during the summer, and specifically promises he made at a pancake breakfast, Stampede pancake breakfast. And unfortunately, in the fall of 2021, he implemented the RP program and the vaccine mandate here in Alberta. And that obviously pissed off a lot of people in the conservative side of things. And Jason Kenney lost his locker room, which leads to the Freedom Convoy, which was a federal mandate and a response to a federal mandate, which leads to the movement in Coutts, which was in solidarity with the Freedom Convoy, but was definitely focused on a lot of the provincial issues as well. It wasn't just in relation to the federal vaccine mandate. At this point, there's no arguing, and I'm not going to deny it. I went there like thousands of people did that Saturday of January the 29th. But I left on February the 15th, and I left as somebody who had played a significant role in that event, in that 18-day event. And I'm thinking about writing a book one day to give my version of those 18 days on the border. But that led to it took a while, Sheldon, for me to actually be charged coming out of that event, and I think there's a bit of a reason there as well. I was very heavily involved in the SGM, the leadership review that forced Jason Kenney to resign, and I think political retribution came after that resignation. And within 2 months after Jason Kenney resigned and was allowed to stay on as interim leader, unfortunately, I think that was a very critical mistake that the UCP caucus made at that time. I had charges that came down the pipe. And as of 6 weeks ago, we finished our proceedings, trial, not finished, but our trial was concluded, and it was a jury trial, and I was found, along with my two co-accused, I was found guilty of mischief over 5,000.
Now, I'd read that, but what does that actually mean? Like, what does mischief over 5,000 mean? Like, what damages were caused to the tune of $5,000?
Well, that's the interesting part. The mischief over 5,000, and mischief in general is a very broad charge, right? You have mischief over under 1,000, and mischief. Sorry, it's mischief over 1,000. Or mischief over 2,500, and then mischief over 5,000. That's it. That's the highest level of mischief that there is. And then obviously, depending on the specific of the case of that case, your verdict and your sentencing will reflect that. So in our case, the theme was always there, right? We're the alleged, and we're the leaders of the Coutts blockade. That was the focus, right? I'm pretty sure if they had wanted to find 10 people who played some sort of leadership role, they would have found 10 people, but they only were looking for 3. They went 1, 2, 3, and it was myself, George Jansen, and my good friend Alex Van Herk. And Alex Van Herk, to some degree, and even media said this, he was found guilty for just being involved with me. He largely had a backseat in a lot of things, and he's definitely there, but he won't deny his involvement. But all the evidence they had in court was that, he stood in a few videos beside me. He just stood in those videos and a few comments. But it was a political prosecution to some degree, right? They're looking to make an example out of us. And now back to what you just asked, What were we found guilty of? What damages did we cause? Well, the Crown didn't have to prove anything. All they had to prove that either we were the we were the principal offenders. So were you, like, as in you had trucks on the highway, you were involved in blockading the highway, even for one sentence. So now we're talking about just the letter of the law, right? We're not taking into account why blue collar, white collar Albertans were pissed off enough to go, to the border, and why Albertans were protesting across the province, and why Canadians were, Canadians, like I said, there's border blockades everywhere. There's protests everywhere. It was a colossal movement, independent of each other. Like, there was no communication, there was no collaboration between these key events. Emerson, Ambassador, Ottawa, Windsor, Coots. People might have known people, but I never had any contact with those individuals. But it was just a groundswell. It was a grassroots movement of frustration and anger against those elected to represent us. And the traditional mechanisms to engage with those elected to represent us was no longer there. There was no, even our MLAs and our MPs no longer had the ability to speak their mind, to ask the questions, to inquire, because Parliament was shuttered, legislatures were shuttered, right? There was no sitting. We were being governed by a EMC, Emergency Management Cabinet Committee, or COVID Cabinet Committee. Like, we were being governed by chief medical officers and premier and his buddies. And I say buddies, I mean a few of those individuals that were in cabinet, and I mean tough decisions and such, but we didn't have the ability to relay our concerns to government. And that's when Canadians did what they had to do and stood up in mass. And I mean, people may disagree with some of the tactics and such, but I mean, we're not here to talk about that. So back to the letter of the law. It came down to that, were you there as a principal offender? Could they prove that you had equipment on that highway or trucks on that highway? And I mean, corporate searches back to individuals, all of that was done. Or were you complicit, aiding and abetting those principal offenders? So the RCMP didn't start their investigation for about 4 or 5 days. I think it was until February the 3rd that they're like, okay, we've asked nicely. We've actually tried to remove these guys. Emergency response teams moved in and we repelled them. That's the word I'll use. We just stood up. We just stood our ground and challenged them, and they were unsuccessful. They resorted to a few other tactics, but they realized we weren't going anywhere. I think there was the mindset in government and in the RCMP that, okay, we get it. People are pissed off. Let things cool down. Let's put some pressure on them. They're going to go home. Except we didn't. And it was in that first 4 or 5 days that a lot of things happened that weren't documented, and which I'm very thankful for, because it could have changed a lot of things in proceedings as to evidence against myself and others as well, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that there's things that they didn't have. It just, they didn't have a lot of things that did happen in a certain manner. For example, the evidence that came forward as to the first semi that blocked the intersection, it's like, no, that's not what happened. That's not the first semi. That was the first semi that blocked the northbound intersection, but southbound had been blocked by 4 semis for an hour already, right? But they weren't there. They weren't mobilized. They were caught off guard. They even say that. They were completely caught off guard on January the 29th by the amount of people. And I mean, a lot of people wanted to go to Ottawa, but not everybody could go to Ottawa. Southern Alberta Coots Highway 4 for Alberta and Central and even Calgary area was a lot more realistic and feasible. Well, I mean, they showed up 35 kilometers of traffic, to some degree, single and double lanes. That's a lot of people. And obviously that was, not everybody was there for this event for its entirety, but even by the Monday, the Tuesday, there were still hundreds of trucks. And it wasn't until the Tuesday and the Wednesday that they actually were mobilized to have an investigative team to start to, take drone pictures and start to document things and really take evidence, take notes and things like that. So they had a lot of evidence because it was an 18-day event, and there was moments where there was just leadership needed. And I've said it all along, there was no elected, anointed, appointed leaders, but leaders lead. And when CBC actually did some investigative journalism and figured out that I was Fort Macleod Town Councillor Marco van Huigenbos, it was like the beginning of the end to some degree, right? People in my own side of things, because there was a lot of Mennonites, a lot of Dutchmen, there's a lot of people, like people came as a group from their respective communities. It was like slow rolls to a meeting point, and then it was like Highway 4 South, and it was like you hung out with the people you knew. And so I wouldn't say factions, but there was a lot of different groups. And as this event started to unfold and become something, people were looking to others. And I mean, a lot of truckers, a lot of farmers. And I think at that time, I was probably the only one that had any political experience. And I mean, for better or for worse, just the systems, just interactions with the RCMP, a lot of that. And I very, very quickly, I was involved with 6 or 7 individuals. I would, I'm not one to shy away from taking some responsibility, and I'm not stupid. So I was able to articulate some strategy and be involved in that, and just the logistical challenges we were facing at that time. And there was, a lot of people said, oh, we don't talk to nobody, no media, no nothing. And I was opposed to that. It says we have to communicate. We have to communicate with the RCMP. They're not the enemy. We're here. We're pissed off at the government, but we're not here to fight the RCMP. So very quickly, it was asked of me to, would you be that person? And I wasn't 100% on board with it until, and it just kind of happened that at that time CBC came out with that article, and all of a sudden everything was just, it was directed at me. They had my email, they had my number. I remember the mayor, Fort Macleod, being, talking to me and saying, well, you got to talk to these people. There's a lot of questions. And next thing you know, I was doing interviews while I'm at the border in my truck with a laptop, and and I mean, I kept it short, and it was a learning curve, right? You're under the gun, you're under fire, you're live at times, and they're trying to trick you. And a lot of people had questions as to how could you do that? You're an elected official. And it also came with a lot of negative, obviously, right? A lot of people had different opinions on this. And I wore a lot of company paraphernalia, right? I had a hat and a coat, and very quickly my office staff was getting harassed, and to the point where we even had threats come in. And I mean, via email, I have a stack of just nasty, nasty stuff. We had our website. People could go on our website, name, number, email, what are you looking for? And they would just write all sorts of crap, right? Like anything from, we don't agree with you, to, go die somewhere along those lines. And I think you understand what I'm trying to say here, like just the nastiest stuff.
Now,
But
was that a lot of anonymous emails that were coming to you, or like were people using their real names?
The more civil stuff that was direct, but more opposed to what we were doing, was at times people that you could, like real people, real emails. But it was the nasty stuff, like just the stuff that you'd never get away with saying publicly. Was anonymous, right? Fake email, fake name, and then just like unload, right? So it was a lot of like, chuckle. It's like, okay, next. But it was some of the phone calls, right, to the office that were the worst. And one of them was particularly concerning. It was the end of the first week. So it would have been 2-3 days after the CBC had figured out. I was down there, and there was a lot of focus on me, Fort Macleod Town Councillor, alleged organizer. And I was never the organizer, but you know how media does things, right? And
especially the CBC, yeah.
Especially the CBC. So I remember this phone call, or this message from my administrative lady, and it wasn't till like 6 o'clock. She's like, hey, I just been thinking about this last call that came in at like 4:55. She's like, I was like, yeah, what's up? And she's like, well, they rattled off your name and your address and said, we're coming for your family. And it just, like, you could say, well, what took her so long? Well, I mean, she was trying to, she was just dealing with the context of that. Like, they didn't say hi, nothing. They just said name, name, address, we're coming for your family. And that was concerning, right? So I remember phoning my dad, phoning my father-in-law, and I says, hey, I don't think it's wise for my family to be at home while I'm here or while I'm not there. And for the remainder of the event, the Fort Macleod RCMP got involved. And for the remainder of that event, my family was not at home. They were elsewhere.
Now, did the RCMP ever do an investigation on that?
No, they didn't do much more than no, they didn't. No, I don't think they did an investigation. I mean, was it a real threat? It was a threat. It was given. It was passed on. But I mean, they took it seriously, as in, you guys did the right steps. Your family isn't there. We're going to keep an eye on the situation. Let us know. But it wasn't like, okay, what was the number? And we're going to follow up with that. I just don't remember that ever happening. And by the time the event was over, it had kind of faded into the background, right? Like, there was just so much animosity in general that it wasn't like one clear perceived threat. It was from all directions. Like, I mean, on Twitter, somebody had pulled up an old Twitter account, and there was Facebook. And I mean, you almost became a little cold to it, right? But that being said, I don't think anything, I think a file was created, and I think they would have, I think it would have been up to us to really pursue that or put pressure on them. But I don't think anything went further than a few discussions with the RCMP at that time. So, I mean, I'm literally talking about it to the extent I've never had this discussion as broad as I have now. It's just like, I don't want to dwell on that either. But I mean, that was what we were, and I mean, my family was dealing with, right? So it was, there was a lot of pressure on me because of that, right? Some people are like, oh, Coots was great, or Milk River was great. And I was like, yeah, it had its moments, but I mean, I've never been busier. I've never been under more pressure ever. And I mean, I can handle a lot of pressure, but that was, it definitely wasn't a party for me. I can promise you that. So, but I mean, I felt a responsibility, right? And people started to look to me for things. And it was always a group decision, whether we stayed or whether we went. There was a lot of logistical decisions and a lot of things that happen. And I mean, those decisions happen on the fly. Like, I mean, during the proceedings, multiple RCMP officers were like, Marco was able to make things happen. He said things would happen, and they happened. And I mean, the RCMP wasn't our enemy, and a lot of people didn't like me, communicating or negotiating with the RCMP, and I felt it was critical. It was a bit of a chess game, right? We were always moving pieces, and I mean, we were always moving tractors, we were always moving trucks. The border was open, the border was closed. It had to do with the amount of metal we had on the highway, the amount of people. Was it the weekend? Was it a Monday? But it had to do with the fact that some people said, well, you should have just been on the rumble strip. Well, being on the rumble strip and honking wasn't going to get the attention in Edmonton that we needed. And having that border completely shut down for all, like never opening it up would have meant they would have moved in on day 5. They would have just said, these guys are not willing to talk to us. We have to just step in. We just have to enforce. But we opened up those lines of communication. We worked with them. At times there was a lane open. At times there wasn't. And, they weren't happy with what we were doing with the equipment and bringing them in, but we were losing trucks overnight, right? Guys said, owner operators were, I got to go back to work, or companies said, you've been here a week, you got to go. This wasn't the plan. So we'd lose like 5 or 6 trucks in the middle of the night. And I heard those trucks rolling out, and I never blamed a single one of them, right? It never was the plan. Even in Ottawa, it was never the plan to it was a plan to go to Ottawa, but nobody knew what it would turn into there. It was a plan to go to Coutts, but we never could have imagined that we would have been there 18 days. Like never. I believe there's lots of regret on the side of enforcement to even allow us past day 3. Hindsight's 2020. There's regrets on my end too, as to certain decisions. But I mean, even the decisions that were wrong at times worked in our favor for the right reasons, right? We didn't have an exit strategy. And I mean that narrative, I'm not going to get into it. It's still before the courts. But if the events of February the 14th hadn't happened with the firearms and the conspiracy to kill RCMP officers is complete bullshit, but the firearms to some degree are real. And I mean, you could find that amount of firearms down any gravel road in southern Alberta, but they put a narrative on it, and we didn't know that at that time. All I knew was the message was lost. The support we had was gone. It was guns, guns, guns. That was the headlines. It was time to go. I knew that, and looking back, that was definitely the right decision. But imagine that hadn't happened. The RCMP would have attempted to do what they did in Ottawa. Come in, arrest us, drag us, smash truck windows, try to drag tractors off the highway with the D6. You think that in southern Alberta that would have gone over the same way that went over in Ottawa? I think that would have been. I think there would have been, to some degree, civil unrest across southern Alberta as a whole. I think there would have been mini block.
I think you're absolutely right. You'd have had thousands more coming out.
I think there would have been sea drills and discs laying across every piece of pavement in this province. So I'm thankful that we left of our own accord. And, I think it was a victorious retreat. And I mean, it's changed my life, the event since, but it was a win. Some people say, oh, you should have stayed. Government was a week away from falling. I was like, what does that even mean? Government was I'm not an anarchist. I believe in the rule of law. Now, unfortunately, there was people in positions of authority that were breaking laws as well. And to this day, they haven't been held to account for that. But that is what we strive for. But I mean, even weeks after, people are like, what are we doing now? And I'm like, get involved. Get involved in your politics. We can't just go block borders every day, guys. That's not what we do. And I mean, I think some people want to do that every day, all day. And I mean, it takes a certain level of, it takes a lot of balls to do what we did. But we were angry. We were frustrated with Edmonton and Ottawa. And I mean, Ottawa, we know in Alberta, it's tough to connect with Ottawa. So it was Edmonton. It was always, for us, our struggle was with Jason Kenney. And which put us at odds with a lot of conservatives. And I've always felt that, right? Coutts is the black sheep of the freedom movement. It's the, those guys, they took it one step too far. But it's Alberta. We do things a bit different here. And I look at the successes. Who was most successful? I know the key players from Ottawa very well. They're good friends of mine. We've definitely connected, and I talk to them almost weekly. But we were successful in Alberta with our protests, right? Very quickly, the mandates were fully dropped, and I know there's still certain mandates in certain levels of health or things like that. But it led into things like TBA and the grassroots movement in this province that is still, to some degree, a bit broken apart, but still very involved and very effective. And I think that Coutts was a big part of that. We united the individual anger that Albertans had. A lot of people were angry, but they were worried. They thought they were alone. And I think it was the role of the Freedom Convoy from the island through Calgary, through Okotoks. No, it wouldn't have gone through Okotoks. Maybe it did. Anyways, to then, leave Medicine Hat that Monday morning and head to Ottawa. It was that convoy rolling through the country that gave hope. And in solidarity, we went to Coutts, right? And I'll never forget it. And for me, it's so personal as well. But I mean, it was needed. People had been fighting their own battles for years at that point. I mean, almost 2 years, and it united Canadians, it united Albertans, and I think in Alberta we've seen the success of that politically. It's stemmed into a real movement, and there's a lot of groups, and a lot of people are involved in different groups, and there's a lot of different opinions. But I think the key goals of accountability and responsible government are there, and we have to continue to push for that. So I mean that we've bounced around a bit here, but that leads to proceedings in my conviction 6 weeks ago. Our next court date is July the 22nd. That's our arraignment date. That's where the Crown and the defense will present their positions in relation to what they believe is fair for sentencing. Why, Mark was this, Alex does that, and there's no priors or things like that. And then a sentencing date will be set, I believe the end of the year, maybe early spring. And then at that date, we will be sentenced. And that could be anything from, and it could differ on individuals. We're co-accused, but we're only connected to the point where it benefits the Crown. Logistics. They get to try us together. They could have found some guilty, others not. We are all guilty, but the sentences could differ from each other. So could be anywhere from months of house arrest to 6 months to 2 years in jail or more. And I mean, I don't think it would be more unless they're really looking to make an example out of us. But it's tough to really speculate at this point. So that's where we're at.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And I can still say the same thing, is that a lot of people still, and we're 2 years after this, right? More than 2 years from when
more
the
than 2 years
happened.
Yeah.
And you were out with us in Edmonton. You came out to the gathering that we had at the local on Jasper Ave there. And
3 weeks ago today.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I forget. I wasn't tracking time. But when I was there, I talked to a lot of people, and I said, like, do you come out to a lot of these? And they said, no, this is the first time ever. And so many people that showed up, and there was a lot of people there. I'm not sure the head count. I don't even want to speculate on that, because somebody will inevitably, call me a liar or whatever. But it's not the point of how many people there. I know that there was more people in the Edmonton one than there was in our Calgary event. And so I'm really going to have to, bring things up in Calgary, because we're not going to have our asses handed to us by Edmontonians.
That's right.
Don't get me wrong. I was born there. I say that Edmonton still holds a special place in my heart, but Calgary will always be home. But no, it was amazing. When we got out in Calgary, when we got out in Edmonton, we started meeting some people. There's still a lot of people that are out there that still feel alone, or that felt alone until they could, kind of get together with us. A lot of us couldn't go to Ottawa. A lot of us couldn't go to Coots. I was invited out to Coots a couple of times, but with kids and grandkids, and there's something always going on, yada, yada, yada. I can make excuses as good as the next guy, but I mean, when people were down there, when they were available and they spent their time, I was doing my thing online. I was writing, content, and I was, meeting with other people. I was speaking at, some events, that sort of thing. So, I mean, we all kind of felt our place in the same frustrations in what we'd seen with the government. And, we were all doing our part. And, even through the leadership thing with Kenny, I was out in Red Deer on the day that they were supposed to do this leadership vote. And then there was this, this big, I don't know if it was a protest or it was everybody was showing up to vote Kenny out. And then they moved the venue and wouldn't let him in. And so, yeah, we were out in this, like, I don't even know what it was, like some parking lot. It was all mud, and everybody's just out there waving flags and having some hot dogs. I mean, it was kind of a thing. So I mean, like I said, we all kind of went through our thing. Definitely not to the extent that a lot of the people that spent the 18 days at Coots, or a lot of people that traveled to Ottawa went through, but Whether we were alone in our homes and protesting, or whether we were online, or whether we were having these conversations. Yeah, no, we all felt the same frustrations. And, I think anybody that had the opportunity or that was able to stand up, I mean, I still consider them heroes,
Yeah.
and that's in all honesty. Because I mean, what we're seeing right now in Canada is disgusting, and we're being punished for standing up to the Liberal government. I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now has been a plan of their own all along, but I think that they've instituted a little bit of more punishment inside of that. And because they didn't get a majority, and because they have to rely on the NDP, and because the NDP is saddled to them, everything is political right now. 100% of everything is so political right now. And the things that they're instituting on Canadians is, I'm going to say, to some extent, it's worse than what the mandates were. And the reason that I say that is because, I know there's a lot of young families that were struggling through COVID to make ends meet, and a lot of people that were, what's going to happen with my job. Well, we're coming into when people had renewed their mortgages, came off of fixed and fixed rates, and or were on fixed rates, sorry, and they're now going to be coming on to a higher mortgage rates. And with the cost of groceries, with the cost of gas, with the cost of everything that's skyrocketed, this is the punishment that we're actually feeling for not going along with the jabs or whatever it was. We don't know what it would have looked like if if the majority, or if more people didn't get that, or if everybody was just okay with the mandates. We don't know what life would look like right now, but it's pretty fucking bad.
Oh, I agree. I think we're calm before the storm. I think we are facing a serious affordability crisis, and I mean it's already started, but I think it's only going to get worse, right? We had a bit of a discussion in our preamble as to some of these like the bird flu, H1N1, some of these viruses going around that are affecting our supply chain. And I mean, this brings me to something like, remember all these food processing facilities that were planes would fly into them, or they'd start on fire? I haven't heard a whole lot of that lately.
Spontaneously combusting, yeah, in the States.
Spontaneously combusting. But it was concerning, right? Like,
it was, yeah.
I mean, massive facilities just, or it wasn't all just processing facilities or logistical centers, right? Like distribution centers, like million square foot center just combusting. And I mean, it was happening in Europe too, like in the Netherlands, and it was just very well. It's probably as intriguing as the 67% of forest fires that somehow spontaneously combust in Alberta as well, right? Like, how does this actually happen? And I mean, when you start to talk about this, when you start to question this, and you start to, just throw thoughts out there, you're vilified for it, right? It's like, no, this is not the narrative. Well, I mean, how easy is it to start? And I mean, look, remember a couple of weeks, remember those 3 major fires that all started the same day in different parts of the province, Edson and elsewhere. And one of them actually turned into the one that resulted in Fort McMurray being evacuated. But like, this doesn't just spontaneously happen 2 weeks after all snow disappears. And this is, They say, well, it happened last year. Well, last year was the start of this. This happened last year, and now it happened again. That's not the norm. I understand that we can have hot, dry summers, and I understand that wildfires in this province are a real thing. It's kind of like building in flood zones. Well, when you have cities in forested areas, you're going to be susceptible to some risk of being in the way of a wildfire. But to have wildfire season in the beginning of May, I'm sorry, I don't remember this growing up, Sheldon. It's not real. It's happening. I get that, but I believe it's 100% arson. I believe it's arson.
Yeah. And we'd seen this in Calgary, and as a kid growing up, and it was Nose Hill every year in Calgary. Nose Hill burned, and you could almost set your clock to it, right? And of course, they always blamed somebody throwing a cigarette out in the ditch or whatever it was, but no, it was purposely burned, and I think everybody at the time knew that. But we haven't even seen one of those fires in years. So yeah, when we're seeing the Alberta fires and the devastation that it actually caused last year, that was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just, inside of Canada or inside of Alberta. It was across Canada, and it was like globally.
Yeah.
Something that's never happened globally before, like orchestrated fires, now all of a sudden starts happening when they throw out a term called global boiling. Because for the most part in Alberta last year, we had a below average seasonal summer by way of temperature. Nobody was buying the fact that the planet was boiling because everybody could walk outside. And, I think it was maybe 6 or 7 times last summer, I had my furnace on. Like, I had my furnace on more times last summer than I had my air conditioner on. So I'm not alone in that. So I know a lot of other people were going, yeah, this global climate boiling bullshit is pure bullshit. We're not buying on it. So they had to amp it up. I say that. And I don't care if people call me a conspiracy theorist on this, because I'm saying the same thing that you are. How does something that's never happened before just happen? Oh, it's not climate change because the climate's actually always changed. And it's not changing to a degree where the planet would set on fire. So
Exactly.
yeah, let's not even throw around the whole climate change possibility.
It is changing. Climate changes. It always changes. But I'm sorry, we've only documented, and I mean, we only have accurate record keeping for the last 100 years of, and I don't care what you believe, but I mean, I believe in creation, so that puts it at below the 6,000-7,000 years old. But if you believe in the evolution theory, that puts it at 1,000,000 years old. So we've gone through numerous ice ages, we've gone through extermination events, and the world is here through millions and millions of years, and we've only really documented accurately the last 100 years. But we now have the answers. We have all the statistics we need to know that climate change is going to result in what's happening here is going to result in the extinction. And it's the biggest threat to human life on this planet as we know it. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. I mean, there's been humans on this earth for 7,000-8,000 years or longer. And I mean, depending on what you believe, this is what I believe. But we now in the last 100 years and the last 50 have tracked it to the point where it's the biggest threat facing mankind. And we're going to throw, and I mean, the fix is what? Throwing money at it? Like, I think we've thrown too much money at it, because I mean, I've never seen, it's been a pretty cold spring so far, Sheldon. Like, I think we got to pull it back a little. I think we're doing too good a job with this climate change.
It has been cold. Man, I was in shorts today. I planned to mow my front lawn. It was like, it's too cold to do that. I ended up doing my barbecue because I'm a little bit more sheltered from the wind. But no, we haven't had a lot of hot days yet this year. And, not that we typically do. May is, kind of a crapshoot. But, all the people, that complain about, it's too hot or it's too cold or it's too whatever. And this is a brand new phenomenon. It's like, well, no, all you have to do is pay attention to a couple of significant events that we see every year. Think about Halloween and think about Valentine's Day. Because even as a kid growing up, my birthday's in February. So some years in February, we'd be tobogganing. And, I'm a couple of days before Valentine's Day. And other times we were just hanging out in the parks, right? And it's the same thing with Halloween. I remember jumping into a skidoo suit and having to go trick-or-treating like that. And other years, you're wearing just a piece of cloth. So people that don't remember the exact season and what the average temperature was for, Fort Macleod or Calgary or Red Deer or Edmonton, if you don't remember what the average temperature was last summer, it's not a big deal. Because some of these things will start to trigger some memories for you. Just think about those two events, Halloween and Valentine's Day. And it's a crapshoot, as if they could tell us, if they could guarantee me that
May Long, which May Long has been dry. Which May Long has been dry.
No, exactly.
It was the thing. Like, I don't do May Long as a family. I did it as a teenager, as a young adult, and it was the thing where you like, don't bother unless you had a trailer. Don't bother even taking a tent. You might as well, you were just sleeping in your vehicle. because it was going to be snow and rain and cold. So stock up on, like you had to maintain the certain percentage of beverage over food. You know what I mean? Like, because that was your way of staying warm, was make sure
Getting
make
hammed up.
sure you don't become sober, right? I mean, it was always cold. It was always raining. It's part of May long. Mud, right?
The whole planting season is based around that. Don't buy your bedding out plants until after May long, or don't plant your gardens until after May long. That's been the rule since I can remember. And I've been out camping exactly twice on May long weekend, and it snowed once and profusely poured the second time. And we weren't any further than Banff Jasper, right? So yeah, it's not shocking. It does feel a little cooler this year. Maybe I'm just becoming more of a wussy, but
well, no, I think it actually is. And you got to remember, the last 3 years it's been hot and dry early on. Like, we've been in the fields early, and this year, thankfully, we haven't been. But I mean, this year is wetter than I ever remember. And well, I mean, there's been 1 or 2 years. There's been some years where there's floods, right? I think 2013 was a flood. You go back to 1995 was the big one. But I mean, overall, it's fairly well. The last 3 years have been really dry, which has led to the drought conditions across the province. Now, we're not experiencing the drought conditions that they've planned for, and I mean, reservoirs are still recuperating, and I mean, groundwater, all of that. So some people are like, oh, lift the drought scenario, and I'm like, well, government doesn't work like that, and I'm okay with that, because if we get another inch in 3 weeks, I will be a long ways into the growing season. But it could get hot and very dry, and it's not even that. It's about moisture in general, which is something they play into, and they tabulate, right? We're down so much, but it's about moisture at key times, especially in this industry, in the ag industry. But as well as I do, Sheldon, that it's not just a mistake or an opinion or something they're responding to, and they could be wrong. No, it's manufactured and it's engineered. When you look at when you look at, what do you call it? Not the weather station, but when you look at the weather on the main channels, and they've manufactured the color coordination in relation to temperatures to now reflect like it's hot all the time. And I mean, 26 degrees is now freaking hot. Turn your ACs on. That, right? Like, I've seen that. What used to be red and orange and yellow at 32, 33, 34 degrees is now 25, 26 degrees. So you're playing with the mind at this point. And I'm not the expert on this, but they're messing around. They're really trying to set the stage for, I mean, something that they want to happen. They got to play into this agenda they have. They really have to manipulate things, and that's where I'm not into this.
It's keeping people in a constant state of fear. When it was snowing in the wintertime, they were forecasting it's going to be the worst snow ever. It's like, well, no, it's wintertime, so it snowed.
They're playing on the extremes.
They're playing on the extremes, and the terminology that they're using, it's the same thing. Like, what are they? Atmospheric rivers, and even these hot days that we have. They're issuing warnings to the elderly for, like what you said. It's like 26 degrees outside. It's not even hot yet. We don't need this kind of alarmism going on. But who's paying attention to legacy media anymore? Like, they've pretty much fallen off. So all they have is sensationalism in order to try and attract more attention. I think they got addicted to the attention that they all got throughout COVID, because people were glued to their TVs. And it was 100% about a manufactured crisis around a pandemic that was never actually a pandemic.
And I believe
Israel,
it's a deflection tactic as well. I believe it's deflecting us from the real problems in society.
Well, and that's exactly it. On Twitter today, I'd asked who feels safe living in Canada right now. And I don't know what the thread's at. Let me just have a quick look.
Is this like the question where would you rather be in the woods with a bear or a man? that they're asking women. Have you seen that one yet?
No. No, I just asked who feels, do you feel safe living in Canada? I've got 605 people that have replied to that. It's over 30,000 views on it. And it was just, I was sitting here reading through comments on Twitter this morning, and I thought, this seems kind of crazy. So I thought I'd throw the question out there. And out of 605 comments, I'm going to say that a solid 95% of those are people saying, no, I don't feel safe in Canada anymore. I don't feel safe living here. And it's got to do with the food. It's got to do with the healthcare system. It's got to do with the government. A lot of people that are in small town Alberta, small town Saskatchewan, up northern Ontario, there's a lot of those people that feel safe. They're not in the urban centers. They're not exposed to the same things that we're seeing, in Calgary. And it's like you said at the beginning, you were in Fort Macleod, so the lockdowns didn't have as much, like they weren't enforcing them as hard as they would per se, in the major centers, Calgary, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Medhat, Edmonton, that kind of thing, right? But it's all of us that are in the core centers right now. I mean, traffic is bullshit. The protests that we're seeing everywhere with the pro-Palestine or whatever's going on with that. The increased rates in crime. Being downtown Calgary, being on the LRT is a scary place to be. And, when I started taking the train in Calgary, I'm going to say 13, 14 years old. We grew up in a different time. So, I lived in McEwen Glen. We had to walk literally a mile to the nearest bus stop because like McEwen Glen was basically the edge of the city at that point. So we had to walk into Beddington. It was basically a mile from my house. So we had to walk there, take the number 3 downtown, and then take the train to any place we wanted to go. We did that at 13, 14 years old. I can't even imagine sending a child onto the train, out into some of these communities, into the downtown core, to see some of the things that I've had to see. It's a scary place to be.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and back to your question, right? Like the protests, and I had a bit of a discussion about that, the different kind of protests. But I had shared this yesterday. Immigration Minister Mark Miller says 5,000 visas will be offered to Palestinians seeking to join family in Canada. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna paint all Palestinians with one brush, but what are they doing to make sure that there is at least a system to ensure that, because we've all seen some of the behavior by, I guess, those families that are already in Canada, those that support Palestine. And we're not gonna have this international debate on Palestine and Israel, but I'm talking about protests in Canada in relation to that conflict in the Middle East and how they're behaving themselves and the attacks on the Jewish community and things like that. And now we here as Canadians, and I mean, it's Canadians, we've always been the peacekeepers. And I mean, I wish we were more of the peacekeepers, because lately it's been fear mongering with Ukraine and you name it. But I mean, here we are bringing in 5,000 more Palestinians. Like, is there any kind of vetting to this? Like, that's highly concerning to me. My comment to that was the Arab League, 30 some nations in the Middle East, and Turkey's part of that. How many Palestinians have they taken in? Right? Like how?
Zero.
Why are zero? I know, because they know what the problem is, and here we're just gonna ignore it.
And see the number yesterday, what Mark Miller said, whatever he said. Yeah. It's Mark Miller. Yeah. He said 5,000 Palestinians, but today it's actually evolved. It's now 5,000 families.
Oh my goodness. So,
and we don't know
families are what?
We don't know. See,
everybody's family now.
Well, if it's a mother, father, and children, if that's what they're considering a family, the statistics I'd seen is that there's 5.2 children per family. So somewhere between 5 and 6 children per family. Like when I looked up the original statistics on Gaza, 50% of the population was like under the age of 14. Like it was something you couldn't believe how many children they have. It's like they're breeding. For the one's sake is to, I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to speculate as to what goes on in a place that I have no intentions of visiting, that I've never been to, because I don't care. It's not Canada. And yes, it's not that I don't appreciate what they're going through, and it's troubling. I get all that. October 7th happened. Israel didn't attack themselves. 1,200 people died. What the fuck did they think was going to be the result? That's my only question. What did you think was going to happen? And it comes around to that whole FAFO thing, right? So, I mean, like I grew tired of the conversations by October 9th. And here we are, 6 months later. And now we've got people on CPAC demanding that we let university students protest on universities. How about fucking no? Because it's not a Canadian problem. Oh, but Canada's complicit, and Canada's... No, it's not our problem. Canadian taxpayers didn't start a war with Israel or with Palestinians. Canadian taxpayers didn't bomb anybody. Canadian taxpayers don't make any money off of selling Israel bombs. So Canadian taxpayers aren't on the hook for all the fucking problems that this caused. And that's where I am. I could care less about who else it is. I'm Ukrainian. My stance on the Ukraine is the same. It's not our problem. It's tragic. But the way they're dealing with the Ukraine and Russia versus how they're dealing with, Palestine and Israel are two very completely different things. Now, as I understand it, Hamas still has, they're still holding people. They're still holding Israelis, right?
Israelis, yeah.
They still have hostages, and they're the ones that have broken the truce. They broke it on October 7th, and they've broken it twice since. So Israel is, of course, saying, no, we're not giving you a truce. And then when Iraq hops in, it's like, okay, well, if you guys want to all get into this, let's do it. But don't start fucking protesting this bullshit inside of Canada, because it's not our problem. None of the Middle East conflict is a Canadian problem. If we want to send peacekeepers over there because we have peacekeepers that we can put in place, and that's what our military is trained to do, that's not a decision for Canadians. That's part of our international relations, and I get that. But when it comes down to the individual situation, we've got people taking over campuses, streets, shopping malls, threatening people in shopping malls at Christmas time. When this becomes a part of Parliament, when we have foreign dignitaries coming into the country, and even to meet with that fucking dipstick Trudeau, and they caused such a ruckus that was the Italian PM couldn't meet with dipstick.
Exactly.
They completely unearthed that, and he did fucking nothing. No.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Well, and that's a problem I have, right? Like, this whole anti-immigration, like completely anti, I'm opposed to that as well. I mean, we have to have an immigration policy. We have to take a second look at this. It needs to be completely revamped. I'm an immigrant. I mean, I was born in the Netherlands, but assimilation, it's got to be a big part of immigration, right? Like, how well do Europeans have integrated into Canadian society? And I mean, we're different than Americans. Like, we're multicultural, they're a melting pot, right? You're all freaking American first, like go go America. Whereas here, you're Ukrainian, right? We retain a lot of our original identity, but we're still Canadian. And I mean, we integrate. We're from the same cultural background that the country was initially founded on. We now see that certain parts, and this goes back to my issue with the legislation that's forthcoming provincially, the halal financing. In and of itself, I'm very aware, and I mean, that tweet has got a lot of traction and a lot of comments, and I've even been in touch with Edmonton on this. And I mean, that's what happens when you rock the boat a bit. But my issue is, I'm very aware that the interest in all of that is built into it, but I'm not opposed to the private sector, bringing that forward and offering it for that ethnic group or that belief or that religion. But for Edmonton to now legislate accordingly, and to some degree, they're segregating society, and they're making it exclusive. And it's one step toward a culture that, as a whole, is very confrontational and does not integrate into Canadian and Alberta society. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And I'm not being a racist here, but I'm sorry. The beliefs and the values of our beliefs and our values in the Middle East are not tolerated. Like, let's be freaking clear. Unless you're in Dubai on business, spending a shit ton of money, you're okay. I mean, you can go on a safari, you can do all of that. But outside of that, outside of those big cities that draw in the world, there is no interest to accept any part of the Western culture. And that's okay. I'm okay with that because I don't believe they should. Well, likewise, in our forever desire to be inclusive and to be inclusive, we're accepting, and we see the results of that in these protests and how they behave themselves in Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, you name it. It's out of control. It's 10 years ago, we would have called it terrorism to some degree. And now we're going to bring in 5,000 times, 5 kids, so 7 plus, that culture believes in grandpa, gramps, they're part of the family. So we're bringing in an average of 8, 9 people. So we're looking at, 50,000 folks. And if it comes down to helping out some of these poor, and I imagine there's poor Arab League nations, but there's a lot of wealth there. So I don't think Canadians need to contribute in foreign aid, but let's contribute in, and the Red Cross isn't my go-to organization, but we can help. We can help in places of conflict to fix the problem and let them help themselves. But let's not bring the frickin' problem home. Remember that African nation? Remember those riots last year? Remember that country? And I don't want to say that term, but it was I can't remember. It started with an E, and they were attacking each other in the middle of the street in Calgary. 2 different ethnic groups from the same country. Yeah. And it's like, I think we got a problem here. I think we're, in our desire and our rush to be inclusive, we're completely losing our own identity, and we're bringing all the third world issues home to a first world country. And we're not going to be able to control this, we clearly see we can't control this. So it's sabotage. It's purely sabotage. This is not a mistake anymore, Sheldon. This is clear sabotage with a headliner of diversity and inclusivity. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. It's going to be a problem.
And we've seen the exact same thing when Trump was president and Trudeau opened up the Roxham border. He did it to thumb his nose at Trump. That stayed open for 2 years of the Biden administration. And it was only done to thumb his nose at Trump. Well, if these people were so afraid of Trump, why did they go to the U.S. to begin with? These people traveled, from before they even got, from the Mexican border, they crossed over into the United States and somehow made it to Canada. If they were so afraid of Trump, why did they choose that path? And if the thing was they were afraid of Trump, well, when Trump was out of office, good, close down the border then. Not our problem. And I do have a problem with too much compassion because now don't get me wrong. I do work with charities. I'm going to be doing some stuff with Vets for Freedom. I do a lot for the veterans. I've done a lot of international charities, children's charities, stuff like that. And I ask people to support me with that. And in a lot of cases, they absolutely do. and I usually have a successful campaign in that I come out in making more than I can contribute myself. And it's fantastic. But I'm not making it your problem. I'm not making it my neighbor's problem. If they can contribute, absolutely. But we've weaponized our tolerance, or our tolerance has been weaponized against us in saying we can continue to give more. There's 8,000 Canadians in a Facebook group that discuss how to dumpster dive most effectively. 8,000
Oh,
Canadians, 2 million hitting the food banks per month. The food banks are on the verge of collapse. One of the charities that I work with is the Veterans Food Bank, and for very specific purposes. We've always supported the vets. My grandfather was one. My son's one. So we've always supported the vets, and for I'm going to say the last eight years, we've tried to do something towards that. But yeah, no, when it comes down to it, we do that because we had the finances. Now I have a tough time working with charity because I know the situation that everybody's in, and I know people want to contribute. So I can encourage people to contribute on their own. But to be honest with you, I think that we're at a point where this year I'm probably not going to be running the same veterans type programs that I have for the last couple of years. For the simple reason being is because I don't feel right. I don't feel right asking Canadians to help me support a charity when a lot of people say, I couldn't do that. I have a lot of people that say, you know what, as soon as I have some money, I'll pay to subscribe to your Substack. And I say, well, no, save the money. Like, it's $5 a month or $50 a year. And for a lot of people, that's not a huge deal, but for some people it is. And I tell them the same thing. Listen, if you can't subscribe, if you can't pay to subscribe, that's fine. You lose nothing. And I tell my paid subscribers the exact same thing. You're going to get the exact same comment, whether you pay to subscribe or not. A lot of people do support me. A lot of people would like to support me. A lot more people would like to, but they can't afford it. Then don't. Keep your money. And that's going to be the same stance that I have to take on charity, because if we're not feeling the bite this year, by April 1st next year, when we see another doubling of the carbon taxes, can you imagine the state of Canada when that happens? We're heading into some very dark places. The first thing, nobody's feeling safe anymore. It's going to be vigilantism that's going to start taking over our streets, because it fucking has to. The cops can't do anything. And even if they could, they're not. You didn't feel safe for your family during that one period when you mentioned the RCMP. Didn't do an investigation. And they still aren't. They'll take a statement, but literally nothing happens from that. And I'm going to give you an example. I co-own a house with my sister in Edmonton, and the city made some changes around the street. So in the last 7 years, our house has been hit 5 times. As soon as it snows in Edmonton, the streets are like grease, and somebody's driven into the front yard twice, knocked over the fence, the backyard once, and hit the house twice. Now we've had to go through insurance on one of the claims, and when we did that, of course our insurance rates goes up, even though we had to double our deductible, even though the car insurance had to pay for the damages, right? Was it last year or the year prior? It wasn't this last winter, it was the winter prior. Somebody again drove into the house, and it's a rental property. So the tenant came out, and the car was no longer there, but the guy had left a front license plate. It was an Ontario plate, so they still use the Ontario plates out there. So our tenant recovered the plate, made a statement, gave the license plate to the city police. It was a rental car. Now, we've tried to follow up on this case for almost 2 years now, and we've gotten zero response. Somebody leaves a fucking license plate and damage at somebody else's property, and the city police are doing absolutely nothing. They won't even respond to emails anymore. We tried to work with city council to get this changed, to get a stop sign put in back to where it was. They said, we can't do that. We said, then cement bollards. Like, between our house and the street, it's a pretty main drag, but there's a large sidewalk that a lot of people travel on. So I literally said to them the last time I was in contact with our city councilors in Edmonton is, okay, what I'm doing is I've got track of all of our email correspondence. I'm putting a camera outside of my house, and it's going to be focused on the same spot that people keep hitting because you guys decided to change the streets. And when a car drives up on a curb and pins somebody to my house, I'm going to take that information, I'm going to feed it to the press, and I'm also going to feed it to the police, because you guys had the opportunity to correct the situation. You had the opportunity to catch criminals. Instead, I'm the one that has to pay out of pocket because I can't afford my insurance to go up again for damage that somebody else did, because you guys don't want to do fuck all about it. And that's upsetting to me.
Yeah.
And
it
that's,
is.
we're just going to get to that place where we see stuff like that happening in the streets. People are going to start taking out bats and sticks and boards and whatever else we need to see. That's where it's going to start. People are tired of having their shit stolen. We're tired of having our like vehicles in Ontario. Everything in my community, and I don't live in the hood. My son was in a liquor store, just like literally a half a block away from my house. Armed robbery. He was in the Canadian Tire gas bar. Some dude went psycho inside of there, started tipping things over. Again, while my son was in there. I've been into 2 liquor stores in my community, and both of them have been robbed while I was in there. Not armed, but they just let these people run out. And yeah, during COVID, there was, I think it was almost every business that had a glass window front had a sheet of plywood out front of it because of vandalism. Our next door neighbors told us how they set an alarm so that they can make sure to press the automatic lock on their cars, because they'd been robbed so many times by just not having their vehicles locked. I had my granddaughter's stroller stolen out of the back of my vehicle while it was parked on my driveway. Now, we can absorb these blows, but I know that there's families that are coming to the end of their rope, and when they buy something for their children that they can't afford to replace and it gets stolen, and when people finally hit their last straws, things are going to get a lot darker. And this only ends in violence. It only ends in violence.
It does. Yeah. And back to, what you were saying before, like, I mean, Canada wants to be a good neighbor, but I mean, we got to take care of our own first. Like, I'm like, full stop. Like, we have to take care of our own first. And we're not, like, veterans, seniors, right? Like, that's the whole drive here, CPP, APP, and, I don't need to get into that, but we're not taking care of our own. We're not taking care of the people that built this country. We're not taking care of the people that defended this country, that fought for this country. We're not taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. I mean, it's gross, but we have billions upon billions for, abortions worldwide, funding this, weaponizing them, all sorts of initiatives in the last 10 years. And I mean, the last 10 years has been a stretch. Like, it's been a long time. Like, we can't remember the Stephen Harper era. All we know, it was a heck of a lot better. And I mean, it wasn't perfect. Stephen Harper, like, they were, and I mean, the country was in a different spot. Like, even the first 3-4 years of Trudeau was different, right? He was a different liberal. He wasn't a Paul Martin liberal. He didn't know anything about economics. He was just useless to some degree. But it's the COVID regime, the liberal regime during COVID and since, we're bankrupted to some degree. And I mean, Canada is a wealthy country. And it's like they know that. Every day they wake up and say, oh, there's a lot of money out there. We just got to figure out ways to get a hold of it. That's not the Canada I grew up in. That's not the Canada I immigrated to. And I mean, are we past the place of no return? No, I don't believe that. But we're in a bad spot. There's this just fiscal. There's a mental health crisis in all provinces. There's the lingering effects of the lockdowns. There is the up and coming and the very prevailing, and I mean, they're trying to hide it and they're trying to bury it. But this, the vaccine injuries and the fallouts, and they call it long COVID. They can call it whatever the heck they want to call it, SUDS or sudden adult deaths, and I don't give a shit. But turbo cancers, we have a serious health crisis on our hands. Is it any reason that COVID is long over and that we can't catch up in our emergency wards and in our hospitals, period. Like, I think that we have no idea the shape we're in when it comes to some of these things. And we're too focused on problems outside this country. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but we need to look in.
$5 billion to for climate change in tropical countries, to me, seems like Canada could use our $5 billion more. And you'd mentioned that $500 million. It's $500 million that, and the figure I get is I think from 2021, $500 million went towards abortions in other countries, like places that you and I couldn't find on a map, and we're funding abortions there. And they're making the conversations about abortion again here in Canada
because the Americans pulled funding, so Trudeau wanted to be the hero.
Yeah,
it's bullshit.
Yeah, we don't have the scratch.
It's so yeah.
So you still have a lot of political connections. A lot of people that are still
I'm involved. I'll leave it at that.
You know a guy.
Well, you want a guy? See my Rolodex here. I know a guy. I know a gal. No. I mean, I stay involved. I mean, I resigned as counselor, but I'm involved.
So is it on the local stage that you're still in communications, or more the provincial? Like you were in contact. I mean, there was MLAs. There was 16 MLAs that joined us for a beverage when we went out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I showed up a little late, but I mean, I know them all.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah. I have a lot of, I have a lot of connections. I mean, I was on the Premier's Southern Alberta team, right? So I made a lot of connections there. People that are now in the Premier's office through Take Back Alberta, people that were involved there. I mean, on the local level, but I also helped with a lot of campaigns. I helped with a lot of nominations, and I helped with a lot of campaigns in the general a year ago exactly today. Well, the month before during the writ. But no, I have. I have. I talked to a few people. So, I mean, as toxic as I am, right?
Well, I think the party is still. I don't think that they're all co-aligned on everything. I'm going to say that.
No, not even close.
And especially the people that lost their seats in this last one, and I think that there are some struggles with some of the boards, and I think that's probably all I'm going to say about that. Because there's going to be a couple of them that I actually want to be a part of, and for various reasons.
There's an AGM tonight. There's an AGM tonight in Fort McMurray, which could be an interesting one. I'll hear about it later. And then there's an upcoming one on Saturday, Rocky Rimby. That's definitely going to be an interesting one. I might actually attend, and it's just a struggle between the grassroots and you remember the whole Tim Hovan, Jason Nixon. That struggle is still very real and very alive. So there's a few of those.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing inside of some of the communities, especially where we lost seats, is there's no UCP presence, and that's what I find the most troubling. Because some of these seats flipped by, a matter of 100 or a couple hundred votes. Well, we've got 3 years to start getting in front of these people. You lost it by 100 or 200 votes this time. If you're not out there competing against or, supporting the UCP, then those next times that we see those elections, we're going to be losing by thousands of votes.
Mm-hmm.
It's only going to get worse. So we have to still make those presence inside of my constituency. I've got I can't remember, Julie Hayter, the NDP MLA in my area right now, took over for Prasad Panda. And, I was driving up to Edgemont from Dalhousie. And there's this great big sign on the side of the berm that's talking about period poverty. Period poverty. Like people are impoverished, and My MLA, NDP, who I absolutely didn't vote for, is talking about period poverty. Like, what the fuck is that all about? How about you start like addressing the crime that's in our neighborhoods? Because that's what a lot of us are concerned with. When Canadians aren't feeling safe, that's what we're concerned with. How about we start addressing that? And I mean, I know that they're the opposition, but if they're the opposition and they're talking about, period poverty, what are they going to be talking about? Should they take office again? And I think that that's why we have to be a lot stronger in our voices and in our support. And if we can't support the guy that's there right now, then we let him know, and we start looking for somebody else. And that's just as plain and simple as it has to be.
So Calgary Edgemont, are you on the board? Are you
No.
involved in the...
No, I'm not. I'm not on the Edgemont board. For the simple reason being is because the current board is a closed board right now, and nobody knows who
Really?
they are. I'm in touch with a couple of people.
When's their next AGM?
I don't even know. So there's some things that are going on in there, and I made a call today to see what was going on, but I'm still not able to get in touch with anybody for that board. And I don't necessarily think that Prasad was a terrible person. Throughout the whole COVID thing, I never got an email reply from that. He blamed it on somebody else. But I said, no, when I'm addressing my MLA, I actually want a response from my MLA. So while I wasn't thrilled with him, and while I still allowed him to put a sign on, and I still voted for him, could he have done things different, better? I believe he could have. When I seen, one of the efforts that he and other UCP MLAs had put out for the Veterans Food Bank around Remembrance Day, because that's when everybody does it, right? The signs that he'd put out, I'm sure, were far in excess to the amount of food that they actually came up with. So, it became one of those, yeah, look at me, I'm really great. If you'd have spent the money on food or given it to the charities, if you were allowed to do that, it would have made a much bigger stretch. Be a part of the community, and they'll help support you. Put out big signs. Sure, you'll get some people out knocking with you, but to me, that's not a community leader.
Right.
And
no, I hear
and
you.
the way that they've sealed it up now, I think they're holding the spot for him. I think he still might be a part of that, but I really don't know. Again, I can't find any information on it.
Yeah, so I'm just looking here. There is a reception next week. Next week, Tuesday, Calgary Edgemont, cocktail reception, 5:30 p.m. The Hamptons Golf Club, 69 Hamptons Drive Northwest, hosted by the Calgary Edgemont Constituency Association. Please join us for a great evening of conversation with guest speaker Daniel Smith. Tickets are $150.
That's for the golf tourney.
Right, but I mean, it's obviously an exclusive affair. But I mean, it looks like there's still tickets. But that would be a good event to try to figure some shit out in relation to who to talk to and such. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I could figure out who the board is here within a couple hours if I wanted to. But I mean, there has to be. I think there's still, and I'm part of a group. I'm part of a grassroots coalition of a lot of people, different organizations throughout the province, APP and like a Bird Prosperity Project, the local guys, Lahi, like we're doing the Injection for Truth and a few other things. And there's some official UCP people on there and stuff. But we actually had a meeting this afternoon. We meet every 2 weeks. And the executive has not done a full audit on the campaign last year. And I'm sorry, that needs to happen. It was too close. We need to look into what was done right, what was done wrong. How do we address this? Like they're looking at the next one. They're looking at firming up a campaign, like a co-chair, campaign committee, and that's good. I'm glad we're ahead of the ball this year. This go around. I mean, we had a lot of. It was COVID and leadership. We had an SGM. We had a leadership race, AGMs, you name it. There was a lot of frustration, but there's a lot of mistakes made. And I mean, fundraising is looking really good. The coffers will be replenished at this point, but last week's Janet Brown poll doesn't look good. Doesn't look any better than where we were last year. So you can be a loyal conservative fanboy, and you can be a staunch conservative involved, but membership is down to below 50,000 members compared to the 125 we had at that time in 22-23, which is normal. But I mean, how are we going to make sure that the message gets out there and that like you said, the message gets out there that the media, who is not our friend, and the NDP, who is not our friend, doesn't continue to hold the popular vote the way they do? Because you remember a couple months ago, there was this article that came out, with some comments out of the Premier's office, some quotes or some whatever it was, how they were salviating for a Nenshi run NDP, how they were excited to run against Nenshi. And I swear I almost threw my phone through the window. Through the window. I thought, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, they were egging him on, they were baiting him, and I thought, Nenshi, I don't agree with the man in anything, but I'll give him this: that guy is a heck of an organizer. He is
That's
not
right.
some, like, of them all, he is the last one I would want to run against, that I would want the UCP to run against. So, I mean, this is bearing down on us. I mean, when does the NDP have their new leader? It's got to be here pretty quick, in a week or so, no?
No, on Saturday, I think they have the next debate in Edmonton, and that should be actually an interesting one. The only unfortunate thing is it's my wife's birthday weekend, so I was going to live stream that with a couple of people, but I think if I did that, I'd be strung up. But no, it's not coming up for a little bit yet.
Okay, but I mean, we're going to have a new NDP leader. It's going to be a breath of fresh air, and for them. And I mean, we thought, okay, nothing can beat Rachel Notley, but Nenshi can. Nenshi is more of a centrist on the political spectrum than Rachel Notley was. Well, that does not benefit us. I'm sorry.
No.
And I mean, like, the more radical they are, the more I'm disgusted by them, but the more others are disgusted by them as well. If we have any kind of reason if common sense starts to somehow become common in the NDP, that's a problem for the UCP. Like, let's be very clear. Like, and to never worry about the opposition, that is the first and the biggest mistake any kind of campaign or people involved in politics can make. You always worry about your opposition, not to the point where you compromise or you worry about what they're going to. But you have to be prepared to deal with the next event, be it 3 years, be it 4 years away. And right now, I mean, we did move the legislation passed last night where we moved the election to the fall from the spring, which, I mean, it's a good thing. But so we're 3.5 years away to the next election. But, like, we should always be, to some degree, we should always be in election mode, right? We should always be looking at the next election. Parts of the party should, anyways. And I mean, not every MLA. They got everything. They got things to do as well. It almost seems like they're always behaving like they're looking at being reelected. But I mean, instead of just doing what's right based on principle or values or morals. But I mean, as a party, as people who work in the party, as an executive of the party, that is always a focus. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? How do we fix this? And I mean, before you know it, we're a year or 6 months away from the election.
And you have to know that if Nenshi wins,
I don't know,
he's going to be campaigning for the next 3 years. Whoever wins for the NDP, they're going to be strong with the press. They're going to be strong in their fear and smear, and they're going to be in tight with the unions. We already see what's happening with healthcare and the way that they're moving on that, and it's a lot about what the failures of healthcare, and it's because Smith's changing things, and healthcare is failing across the country, but nobody's actually going to pay attention to that. They're only going to pay attention to, what if I have to go to the hospital? What is this doing for me? And the Alberta pension program, it's going to be the same thing. Keep your hands off my money. I know Eric and the Lougheed group held their, and they held their Alberta pension plan meeting, but I didn't see a lot of anybody else doing that inside of Calgary. And it's like, well, there was actually quite a few that the NDP did. The AFL was giving money to them to host these events to be anti-APP. We did nothing, right? Not even a blip on the scale. The conversations are still the same stupid conversations. Nobody really knows what the UCP would have planned for the APP. So I mean, when we take these things and give the NDP 3 years of campaigning, that the 10 months before the last provincial election, they were in full campaign mode. Like the unions were spending, what was it, like $1 million a month for 10 months leading into that election. On
it was theirs to lose. It was theirs to lose, and they lost it. It wasn't ours to win. Let's be honest. They lost. It's the people say, "Oh, we won." No, they lost. Like, you understand what I'm saying? There's a difference. The NDP
absolutely
lost.
Yes.
I mean, their biggest mistake was their increase to the small business tax. If they would not have announced that, they would have won, guaranteed, hands down. And I still, to this day, do not understand who thought that was a good idea. Remember, that's what they were gonna bring it from 5% to 8%, small business or whatever it was. They were gonna increase 2 or 3%. And it was like, are you kidding me? I mean, thank you. But I mean, 2,000 votes, 1,800 votes across key battlegrounds in the province, or in Calgary. Sorry. I mean, Arthur Pawlowski's Solidarity Party screwed up, or was the reason why what's her name won in Calgary Acadia versus Tyler Shandro, which, I mean, I'm not going to cry too much over that, but I mean, that is what happened. 100 and some votes. Yeah. Remember, it was a recount, and it swung the vote 25 votes the other way. And I mean, it was 50 some votes, and Arthur got 187. His candidate got 187 votes. Like, not even.
Yeah.
But that's a real thing. That's a real concern, right? To be that close. There is, when you got 8 parties on the ballot. Like, look, federally, right? PPC. And I mean, I don't want to get into that, but I mean, it's what happened. No, I know, but I mean, it's what happened. It's a real thing. I'd have to look. It was like 100 some votes that some guy who nobody knew of, other than the people whose doors he knocked on, or whatever. I mean, I don't know, whatever. Maybe they went to his church. I don't know, but it swung the vote enough. It was so close, and it's a real thing. We need to address that. Like, why are we not talking about that? Why are we not? Yeah. Anyways, you can't do it all, but I mean, we got to learn from those mistakes, because the biggest threat to the UCP is the UCP. We need to remember
10 out of
that.
10. 10 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Getting past that, the media is a very close second. So when they're not stepping on their own nuts, the media is there to crucify them, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they can't afford the mistakes, and they really do need to come more together. And the injection of truth thing, I think, is kind of a big swinger on that. And I've got something planned for that. I've talked to Eric about. And I'd actually just talked to one of the members of the board today or yesterday.
Daryl or Roy?
Daryl.
Yeah, he mentioned he was working with some groups on streaming it as well. So I mean, he probably talked to you, and I actually had a call from him just earlier before we.
Daryl,
part of this group that I'm part of. But he was talking about a bunch of platforms streaming it out, and I mean, that might have been what he was talking about. But maybe
I'm actually I'm going to be at the event.
Oh, awesome.
Because I've worked with them on a couple of things, and they were kind enough to get me and Marty out to the APP thing. Myself and Marty have spoken in front of the group. I've spoken in front of the group. I was invited there when Smith came out to meet everybody at their little central office there, right? So I mean, that was cool. They've kept me included. They're an amazing group of people, and the organization and the skills that they have, I think, like all the all the districts should be cloning, doing exactly what Roy and Eric and Daryl are doing, because I think they're killing it. They're really getting out in front of people and representing. They're not letting anything to chance. I'm not going to say it's like they're in campaign mode right now, but they're doing, from what I see, they're doing what they need to be doing.
They
And
are.
that's how we can take back a predominantly conservative province.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean we're also putting pressure on government, and I mean a lot of well, you remember 3 weeks ago, right? You remember Ava, and I mean I think there's an episode coming out here with me and her here soon. I don't know when exactly, but remember she's like, "Oh, you're all doom and gloom," and I was like, "Well, I mean, like, come on, I've gone through the ringer. I mean, I've kind of got shit kicked a bit, curb stomped a few times, still standing. I'm still here, but it's been a ride." And I says, but I took it to heart to some degree, because I believe in the right amount of credit where it's due and criticism where it's needed. Because
Absolutely.
I'm not big. I'm less government. I'm sorry, but I 100% align with the conservative movement in this province. I mean, but I see a lot of things that are like, holy shit, what are you guys doing? And I'm opposed to how the party works in a certain way. The party whip and all of that. And I'm just, there's some promises not being lived up to. And I mean, I'm going to hammer on it. I'm not in government. I'm not paid. I mean, I can say a lot of things that a lot of people can't say. And I mean, there's times when people look to me to say things that they can't say. And I mean, I have a bit of a following that way, but I'm going to be sharply critical when it's needed. And then people, like, I had somebody message me the other day and they're like, I've been following you for a little while, and if I didn't know better, I'd think you were supporting the NDP. And it's like, why is that? Well, I mean, you're just so critical. And I mean, doesn't the media do that enough? I says, I'm going to be more critical of my own people than the NDP, because I have no ability I don't engage with the NDP. I can bitch about them all day, but I mean, there's such a partisan divide between me and them and you and them that what's the purpose? Like, I'm just, if the NDP get back in, I might just, like, there's no purpose in politics for a little while other than what happened. I mean, like, how did that happen? I mean, there's no involvement. There's no ability to make change, to influence legislation, to push for pension, to push for health reform. No, it's their government now, which is why that never has to happen. But to make sure that never happens, hold your government, like I said, if you love your government, hold them accountable. And it's just such a dangerous thing to be critical and to hold your own party accountable. Like, it's you're walking on thin ice. Like, people are like, they're like, oh, because they don't want to be held accountable, right? Edmonton doesn't want people involved and engaged. We've seen that, the Kenny era. Remember the 1,500 delegates showing up hungover to the AGM? Well, we're going to have 4,500 people. I mean, there's people who say we're going to have 8,000. That's not going to happen either. But we're going to have between 4,000 and 5,000 people showing up at the next AGM. That is a record number. That's breaking last year's record. And there's people in Edmonton who don't want that. Why? Because they can't control that. That's too many people. That's too much power to the people. Because politics has and was, and I mean, it may be changing. It's a private affair. We have democracy once every 4 years, a resemblance of democracy. Our Westminster parliamentary democracy that's predominant in Canadian, it's exclusive in Canadian politics. It's a party system, and it's party first, and then the people. And I mean, then the people. It's party first, party whip, party legislation. There is no. This year we are going to see record numbers. I've heard from Ray Strom in policy. He's on the board. We're 70% through the policy submission session. Like, it's like a month or whatever. And we've already blown by last year's total numbers. Submissions from the grassroots, from the 87 constituency association, from members. 10 members can get together and put in private submissions. We've blown that. Engagement is through the roof. Right? So, I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing. But here's the catch-all. it's largely a horse and pony show if the legislators are not obligated to implement party policy put forward by the members, right?
That's all right.
So
That's how you
my
get. That's how you
focus
get
is-
voter. That's how you take an active group and make them more apathetic again.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's being worked on, but there's pushback. There's pushback from the premier's office. There's pushback from caucus, cabinet, you name it, the executive. They're pushing back hard because they don't feel that they feel like they're the only ones that get to determine legislation. And they have the interests of all members, not just those ones that show up at the AGM. And I'm like, well, no, that's not how that works. Everybody has the opportunity to show up at the AGM. Yes, there's a financial commitment, but to say, well, and I mean, I remember Rajan Sawhney saying last year, well, this doesn't reflect the all the membership after the very clear message we sent at the AGM that we were big on and I want to say, well, we call it parental rights. I just hate to label something that we've had for generations, and now it's like it's some kind of a right. No, it's it's always been the way it is. I would look at it as a transgender policy, but I mean, some MLAs and cabinet ministers spoke out against that. They said this doesn't reflect the wishes of the whole party. Well, I'm sorry. The whole party had the opportunity to show up.
Yeah.
If you don't show up, you didn't have a voice. You neglected your duty or the opportunity to have a voice. So, I mean, that's just wrong. That's completely subverting the involvement of the grassroots, which is what some are attempting to do. And that's the challenge. And that's something that will take some arm twisting. And there's guys like Daryl and Lougheed and down the South. And there's a lot of freedom folks and not even freedom folks. There's lots of people that want the party to be more accountable to its members, want government to be more accountable to its members. This is where I have an issue with Danielle Smith. She's like, I'm here to govern for all Albertans. Okay, I hear you. No. But you're getting something wrong, Premier. You're getting something very, very wrong. You are here to govern through the conservative lens for all Albertans. We are a conservative party that holds government. Quit trying to cater to people who will never vote for you. And I mean never. Quit trying to cater to those folks. You have to govern for all Albertans through the lens of the conservative viewpoint, right?
I agree with that 10 out of 10. Now, when she did try that a couple of weeks ago, was it 4 weeks ago? And it's the problem when you start giving people things for free, it becomes an expectation. But when she started cutting back on the the bus passes for the elderly,
correct.
So I mean,
I think there's more to that story. I think there's more to that story.
There is a lot more to that story. I'm sure of it.
Well, I could tell
but
you.
I
could tell, and it's speculation because I can always back it up.
Yeah, no, you know what? Go ahead.
Okay. So remember, it was to the tune of $12 million, right? Yeah. It's been in place for a couple of years. Subsidies for low income Calgarians, Edmontonians, and I mean, I think for Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, I think it was province wide. There was programs in place. I mean, messaging matters. I mean, we just gave out $15 million to some train study for high-speed rail the week before or the same week. So, I mean, messaging matters. Okay.
Absolutely.
Timing matters. Absolutely. There is an art to politicking. And I mean, they got that one wrong, which is why they immediately retracted it. So, yeah, it's a big budget, $74 billion. I mean, revenues are high, but we're spending our dollars. And I mean, there's a lot of good initiatives, but we're starting to waddle into the Tory land. I mean, I'm not a red Tory. I'm a wild roser. I'm like, okay, guys, batten down the hatches a bit because this shit never lasts. Anyways, that's a separate issue. So there's money for everything, and I believe there should be compassion, but I'm a bit opposed to socialism and the socialist state. And I mean, maybe there has to be some more checks and balances. Maybe there was. I don't know all about the program. But, and this is speculation, and I mean, if there's government listening to this and they hear this, there may be certain individuals in government who will now again have another beef with Marco van Huigenbos. But I really don't care. So this was the ministry of Jason Nixon seniors and afford, or whatever his ministry is. He is the one that falls under his department. And I mean, how fast it was re-implemented. I think Rick Bell had to almost retract his story the next morning, because it was by noon. It was completely, it was completely refunded. It was dead, and it was probably the right thing to do, I believe. And based on the statements made by both Jason Nixon and the Premier's office, was that it was a mistake. It was overlooked. Somebody in the department cut it and didn't even communicate it, because I think the cities found out, like, it's like somebody was doing an audit and was like, hey, what's going on here? And then they followed up on it. It wasn't an announcement that we have a budget where you go through 188 pages of the budget and you're like, okay, clearly we don't have this. I feel it was done. Drum roll. I feel it was done to sabotage and to put bad press out there for this government and for this premier. I believe that this was a political tactic used by an individual in government to cast shade on the premier's office. And I mean, she's liable for a lot of things, but sometimes things happen. She's liable for everything to some degree as leader, right? Politically, shit runs uphill. So I mean, I think this was a
hit job.
How do you say that? It was a planned mistake that put a lot of bad press on the premier and her office for the course of 24 to 48 hours. And I mean, I could be wrong, because I don't believe mistakes like this are made. Like $200,000, okay, forgot to send the check in the mail. $12 million, I'm sorry, Sheldon, I don't buy it. I mean, to think they could slip that by as well, I don't buy it. So was this, I should almost look into it. Was this in the budget? And did somebody just try to play a little bit of politics here for 48 hours? Was there some, go ahead.
In the grand scheme, $12 million for anybody to snatch a program provincially for $12 million, when it deals with, seniors or, low income, nobody would touch that. No, I can't see anybody doing that, because it's $12 million. $200,000 is a large, if I had to come up with $200,000 tomorrow, I'd struggle. We don't think in terms like that. But, when we're looking at governments that are now spending billions, and, now that our federal deficit is in trillions, like those are big numbers that most people can't conceptualize. But $12 million is basically chump change to the way the government spend money now. And it wouldn't be worth it for anybody to look at that and go, you know what, we really need $12 million. Let's shaft the seniors. Like
exactly. And
I don't buy it. Yeah.
Well, and I spoke out. I was really critical. I was like, you know what? Okay, if we are going to start cutting, I mean, we just gave $344 million to Calgary to build a new arena, and then we gave another $50-some million for infrastructure. Sorry, the other way around. We gave X amount for infrastructure upgrades around the new arena, and then we gave, I'm sorry, I mean, I am as conservative as it gets, but bus passes for folks at a time where they're struggling versus hundreds of millions for, bread and circus, you're not going to find me on your side at this time. I mean, I didn't speak out against the arena deal. I don't have a horse in that race. I mean, if we were in the middle of a recession, yeah, I'd probably speak out. But I mean, it's a huge boost to the city. It's a world-class, I mean, I don't think we should get involved, but we have gotten involved. We got the Rogers Arena, and now we get whatever they're going to call this one. So we're doing it everywhere. and we have to do it. But let's not fight over chump change. $12 million for seniors or for low income folks. I'm sorry.
That's what I'm saying.
A certain portion there's a portion of our population that is less fortunate, and people can say, "Oh, it's their own fault." No, I don't buy all of that either. I don't buy all of that. Yeah. Sometimes you need to have checks and balances. There is abuse. There is definitely abuse of social services in this country, in this province, 100%. But you don't take out the baby with the bathwater. I'm sorry. This is not how we cut the whole program. So I think there was more to it than that. That's the political. That's me being a little sharing here with some of the political savviness that happens. But it was reinstated. It was but it was bad publicity, right? It makes us look bad. And why did that happen? So that's where I struggle with messaging and who was actually to blame here. And who knows? Maybe somebody got their hands slapped behind the scenes. But there's a lot of politics happening in Edmonton on any given day. I think you know that, and I'm just here to share that definitely happens. So.
You do have some unique insights. I'm to call me a neophyte in the political arena would be generous. I don't spend a lot of, prior to COVID, actually prior to Trudeau, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about politics because it's not something that I had to think about. It's only because of Trudeau, and I think that that's a lot of what we're seeing inside of the province now. It's because of Trudeau that everybody's going, no, I've actually got to take part in this because things are getting too bad. And if I don't stand up now, there's not going to be any reason to stand up later. I'm not going to have anything left. And I think that that's where we're starting to see a lot more people getting involved with this. But it's on both sides. Like the NDP is definitely up in Calgary. They've talked about some numbers and stuff. Race. Well, yeah. So, you can expect that going on. But again, if they stand up now and they carry that for the next 3 years, which they can conceivably do and run with it, then Calgary will be the next Edmonton. And then where the fuck do we go? I don't want to live in Lethbridge, too windy. Red Deer's not terrible, but it's not like I can uproot my kids, my grandkids. It's not like we're all going to travel together, and we're a pretty tight fam. So we want to stay, pretty much centralized. I've got no ideas that I'm going to be leaving Canada anytime soon because I can just simply up and leave. Mexico? Well, and that's it. No, Mexico is kicking people out because the cost of living has gone up too much since the Americans and Canadians were there. They got 70,000 people that they were trying to round up and kick out of the country because it's putting too much of a strain on the local people by having too many people immigrate into their country. Who'd have thought, eh?
And are they wrong? Calgary, what, 6%? That's unsustainable. I'm sorry. Our infrastructure just can't handle that.
It absolutely can't.
This whole, and they canceled the Alberta is Calling campaign, but the $5,000 for tradesmen to come here. It's not the worst thing, but why don't we, offer, if it's really about trades and, having qualified, having a qualified workforce, let's sponsor, let's give grants out to students entering the trades, SAIT, NAIT, Polytechnic, you name it. Let's subsidize that, right? Instead of giving $5,000 to people from all parts of the country. Is it a horrible idea? I think it's a horrible idea given the current circumstance. There's interprovincial immigration or whatever they want to call it. It's through the roof, and it's all coming here at this point. And we're the destination of choice until we become the thing that everybody's left, right?
That's right.
Homelessness, crime, people are moving here for a better future. But there's only so much housing, the style of housing, there's only so many jobs. certain kind of jobs. So then eventually people run stuck here and they don't have the ability to leave. And then they turn to less, I mean, you're talking a certain percentage of the population. They just can't get their feet underneath them. And then we have a problem here in Alberta, and it's Alberta's problem. And that's where it starts to cost us money, policing and social services. And like you said, the food banks and all of that, like it becomes a burden. And I mean, we're a have province, but we're not a have province because we just open up. And I mean, our borders have always been open, but there may come a point where if we are that shining light in the West, I think there should be some interprovincial immigration policies coming forward. And we have the authority to have that discussion with Ottawa, that because all these people, they're automatically eligible for our healthcare, education, you name it. Well, I mean, that's all paid. That's not user pay. That's free, right? I don't know.
Yeah, we only get so much as a province from the feds to put towards our own infrastructure and essential services.
Yeah, and is it census based? Is it census based, right? Is it based on the population, or is it just 10-year agreements, X amount a year? Well, I mean, if we increase our population by, and I mean the numbers they're talking, 10 million in 50 years. Well, I don't know, man. It's a big province, but do we have the room for it? Sure, we have the room for it, but it has to be phased. Like, we do not have the ability to build the infrastructure that's required for 10 million people in this province in the next 50. It's just not doable. The cost to do that, it's not sustainable. I mean, we can't plan. Like, government is not set up to respond the way the private sector does. And I mean, private sector doesn't set up, infrastructure to that degree. But I think 1 or 2% max is tremendous growth. Look at it, right? That would be 1%. That'd be 400,000. Sorry, that's 10%. That'd be 40,000 a year, or 45,000. That's a small city every year. Well, we're doing 6%. It honestly, it blows my mind. We're walking
can't be done.
We're walking into problems. Anyways, so
we're not even walking. We're diving right headlong into them. Hey, you know what? This has been an amazing conversation. And I really do enjoy talking to you. And I don't want to cut you off, but we're kind of approaching on 2 hours here. So what I think we need to do is I just need to be in better contact with you. I'm going to definitely reach out to you for some sources and some conversations, but I wouldn't mind a political chat, maybe getting a couple more people on and just kind of wrapping this out with you.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I've been told I have to be careful who I talk to. I mean, I've been on some different shows recently, but I will. I believe in keeping things respectful, and there's a certain decorum to politics, and there's red lines I don't cross. And I mean, I'm still here. I mean, like I said, I've a lot of people not physically curb stomp me. That wouldn't work for him, but I mean, I like I said, I've been through the grinder a bit legally, politically, and I mean, I'm still here. So I would love to continue these conversations. I think I have a bit to share, and I'm always open to different perspectives. I think that's how we come together as different parts. And I mean, we're not that different, but even having people from different parts of society or the political divide, it's interesting. As long as we keep it respectful, I think there's an opportunity to learn. And I mean, I said it the other day, I said it last night, I says, ever since the Trump era, and I don't want to blame Trump. I mean, it's just the way it is. But remember Senator John McCain?
Yep.
Passed on now 4 or 5 years. He was Republican, diehard Republican, but he had the ability to work the aisle to do what was right for the American people. Unfortunately, there is no more working with different sides of the aisle, like federally, like you're not even, like, you don't even want to at this point. The divide is so great, but there is no cooperation. There is it's like the role of the opposition to oppose, no matter what. Like earmuffs on, oppose. And I mean, there's times where we can all get together on certain issues. And I mean, I don't know if I could agree with the Liberals on a whole lot. Maybe that's what the problem is, or the NDP. But I just feel like there's no more appetite to do what's right, to put aside partisanship, to come together in a nonpartisan fashion, and to do what's right for Albertans as a whole, instead of always opposing. You've created there's so much animosity in politics at this point that it's like the Grand Canyon of political divides. Anyways, it's that is a discussion for a next time. I mean, a real political discussion is how do we come together? Because it's not just Edmonton, it's not just different sides of the aisle, it's society as a whole. There's a lot of,
and that's
obviously it's been, yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right. Because I've been saying the same thing. Is that the NDP is obviously not voting for their constituents in supporting the federal and federal Liberals. Like, how many investigations has the NDP closed down? Like, that's not a supply and confidence deal. You don't vote against your constituents who would like to see an investigation into the governing party of Canada. I'm sorry, you don't do that. So that without representation, without these people that are willing to at least meet at the aisle, meet in the Grand Canyon, it's 100% tribalism, and it's that nobody's listening to the people. They're talking down to us. They're like the rulers. No, you're an elected official, and yeah, it'll take us 4 years to fire you. But then where do you go? Where's Jagmeet going to go after the next election? Because I mean, he's basically gutted the party. There's going to be a leadership review of the federal NDP. Nobody's going to want to see him back. So I mean, where does a guy like that even go? Anyways, you know what? Let's hold that all for another time. I do want to take and thank you for spending a couple hours with me. It's been a great conversation. Really did enjoy it. And I always like to thank everybody that took some time and kind of hung out and watched us this evening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you do hop onto like Facebook, and there is a certain way that you can enter comments in on Twitter. I'm open to having a lot of comments and questions for a conversation. So feel free to do that. But again, thanks everybody for taking some time and listening to me and Marco just kind of slam things around for a couple hours.
Yeah, appreciate it. It was great.
All right, man. Sheldon. We'll talk soon.